The Chamorro people have inhabited Guam for thousands of years. However, for the past few centuries, Guam has been ruled by foreign powers. The Chamorros have since fought time and time again to attain the ability to once again govern themselves and have slowly been coming towards that goal. Although there are many problems left to solve, the conflicts that several individuals went through for the island are what allowed the people of Guam today to enjoy more rights than many that have come before us. The people that would one day be known as Chamorro arrived on Guam over 4,000 years ago. They were independent, having complete control over their own lives, and eventually a clan system formed. These clans were led by a Magalahi. However, the Chamorro people's entire way of life would be put at risk with the arrival of European explorers. On March 6, 1521, Ferdinand Magellan, an explorer from Spain, arrived with his crew on Guam. This is the first known time that Europeans made contact with the Chamorros. The natives met the sailors boarding their ships, and as a result of this encounter, named the Marianas Islands Islas de los Ladrones, which means Islands of Thieves. Despite having discovered Guam in 1521, the island was not officially Spanish territory until 1565, when Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrived on Guam, claiming the island for Spain. During their time as a Spanish colony, the Chamorros were introduced to Christianity and Spanish culture, but had no say in how they were ruled. Until 1898, Guam remained a Spanish colony. The Treaty of Paris, which ended the Spanish-American War, ceded Guam to the United States of America. Despite being a country built on democracy, the US did not give the Chamorros any form of autonomy. The Chamorros weren't even considered US citizens. The island was governed by a naval officer, the first being Admiral Richard Leary, appointed by President McKinley. One of his first executive orders was to forbid the celebration of religious festivities. Later, Executive Order 243 made speaking Chamorro illegal. These acts outraged the Chamorros, as Catholicism was extremely important to them, and they were not even allowed to speak their own language in their land, being forced to learn English. In 1901, the people petitioned for US citizenship. The federal government, however, did not act on this petition or any future petitions due to opposition from the Navy. Governor Roy Smith formed the first Guam Congress in 1917, composed of Chamorro men, but they barely had any authority. Naval Governor Willis Bradley tried to implement changes that would greatly affect the Chamorros. He proclaimed the Chamorros to be U.S. citizens and formed the Second Guam Congress, which was composed of the House of Assembly and the House of Council, although its authority did not increase. Bradley also tried to implement a Bill of Rights for the Chamorro people based on the first 10 amendments of the U.S. Constitution. Bradley was the only naval governor to push for rights for the Chamorro people. After many years, discontent with naval government grew much stronger. In 1949, conflicts with naval governor Charles Pownall pushed the Guam Congress to rebellion. Carlos Taitano, a young assemblyman, knew the power of the U.S. media and planned to use it to spread awareness about the problems of the Chamorros. Taitano reported information of the Congress walkout to his contacts in the press, such as the Washington Post and the New York Times. In response to pressure from the public, President Truman passed the Guam Organic Act in 1950, which made Guam a U.S. territory and granted the Chamorros U.S. citizenship. Despite the Organic Act creating a civilian government, Guam was still not on the path to statehood. The government was also unbalanced, as the executive branch had much more power than the legislative branch, and the governor was still appointed by the president. It was not until 1968 that Congress granted the ability for the people to elect a governor themselves. It was also not until 1972 that Guam was able to have a delegate to Congress. However, this delegate was unable to vote on congressional matters. In 1969 and 1977, two constitutional conventions were held to address issues in the Guam Organic Act. It was believed that if Guam had a constitution, it would give the Chamorros a greater degree of self-government, and that it would resolve problems in their relationship with the federal government. While the draft constitution was approved by the federal government, it did not pass locally, as 82% of voters voted against it, saying that the constitution did not fully address Guam's political status and relationship with the United States.
The time came for the constitution. The opponents, of which I was a lead opponent, was saying, you shouldn't really have a constitution. You should have a political status and then write a constitution that matches that political status. He said the United States declared independence in 1776. It didn't have a constitution until 1789.
In order to answer the question of what political status would be best for Guam, the 15th Guam legislature began to thoroughly analyze what political status would be best for Guam, and it was decided that Commonwealth status, like that of the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands, would be the best option. The governor created the Commission on Self-Determination, whose task was to educate the public on the different political status options that Guam had. The commission held a referendum on which political status Guam should pursue, and 49% of voters chose Commonwealth. Attempting to gain this new improved status, the Commonwealth Act was drafted several times under the administrations of Governor Berdalio, Ada, and Gutierrez. The bill was introduced in Washington, but the Bush and Clinton administrations both rejected it, claiming that several major provisions of the bill went against national defense interests, as the draft stated that the federal government could not take any more land for military use and would have to return much of the land it already has. People have formed activist groups to fight for their rights to self-determination, such as the People's Alliance for Responsive Alternatives, People's Alliance for Dignified Alternatives, or PARAPADA, and the Organization of People for Indigenous Rights, the OPIR. In 1997, the Commission on Decolonization was created to assist the efforts of the Commission on Self-Determination. Under the Camacho administration, the Commission became inactive. However, Governor Calvo activated it once again and tried to assess the public's opinion on Guam's political status. In recent years, Calvo has tried to push for statehood for Guam by appealing to the United Nations, but the movement has been opposed by the U.S.
Sovereignty comes after self-determination. Self-determination is to decide for ourselves, but it does not mean sovereignty is like the United States is sovereign and they have a people that controls the government. We don't have that in control by Washington. California within the Federation has sovereignty. We have no political power. Self-determination is the step that will lead us to that. You have to open.
Life for the Chamorros is different today than it was in the past. They were once free, but are now ruled by other nations. Guam is still on the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories. Many have fought for the compromises that have given us privileges that we enjoy today, and many are still fighting. However, Guam is still a long way from sovereignty, and it is the duty of the Chamorros to fight for it. Should they choose to become further integrated into the United States, or should they choose to become independent? This question is difficult to answer, but one thing remains true. Only through self-determination, by letting the Chamorros decide for themselves how they want to be governed, can Guam truly become sovereign, and only through self-determination can the Chamorros be free.